to Pals in Politics, the place to hear from those teaching, learning, and impacted by politics, government, citizenship, and democracy.
Welcome to our latest Pals and Politics episode. This is the Political Education for Students podcast for teachers, students, and generally anyone interested in politics, government, citizenship, and democracy. And in these podcasts, we talk with people who have been involved with politics, whose lives have maybe been shaped by politics, or have careers that have been influenced or directed by politics. And that could be politics as an academic subject, or just the real world application of it. And we're really fortunate that we have brilliant speakers who want to share their ideas for how politics has shaped them and how politics might be shaping the world around us. These sessions are deliberately unedited. They focus on honest conversations, and that's because we want you to get the unfiltered insight into the views of our interesting guest speakers. If you like what you see, you can see the full extended interviews on the Politics Classroom community, the link which will be in the comments. So without further ado, let's get straight to our guest for today. And I'm really excited by our guest for today, someone that is a commercial director at a law firm, background in business advice, and self-describes himself as a centre-right voter. And fair warning that apparently nothing annoys him more than someone saying, I'm just not into politics. So, Dayle Rodriguez, welcome to Pals and Politics. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to viewers whenever you're watching this. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, James, thank you for quoting me verbatim. I strongly dislike when people say they're not into politics. Now, I understand there is a level of information and processing that one can have, and you can bury your head in the sand and not, listen to the news or read newspapers or go on TikTok or Insta, but ultimately politics affects you no matter what. And even if you say not into politics, politics affects your life. It does. From if you're a student in school, someone sets a national curriculum, politics. If you have to get your health sorted, you go to the doctor, politics. If you're a high function alcoholic like me, jokes, the cost of a pint, like it's politics. It's all enmeshed. So when you say you're not into politics, unfortunately, you are, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, one of my favourite ever quotes, I think it was Lincoln, but I'm not 100% sure. One of my favourite ever quotes is, in the end, when you remove everything, there is nothing but politics. And I think that is fundamentally true. And I completely agree with you. And it's the reason I do what I do. So thank you for getting us right off there on a very big, bold pitch. So let's get started with just a little bit about you, first of all, Dayle, if that's okay. So can you just talk to us about the work you do and how you feel the work that you do and the role that you do is impacted by politics and how you impact politics?
Yeah, so I'll give a bit of my backstory. So I'm originally a web developer, did that many years ago. I was middling to average at best, but what I was very good at doing is taking geek speak and plain English without being condescending. So I moved into management roles and then technical sales. That's what I did for the majority of my career. Many years ago, about 7 years ago, I entered the world of the accounting space, accounting and fintech. Again, not a qualified accountant. Don't ask me about tax. I don't know. But I offered business advisory services, and again, niching into systems advisory. And very recently, within a month, I've become a commercial director of a law firm. And to answer your question, how does politics affect those industries? I'll go with accounting first. Every year in November, we have the autumn budget. And that's when the government says, certain tax rules will change or certain tax rules won't change, and any accountant worth their salt will watch that and communicate to their clients, business owners, usually SMEs. So for those who don't know, 90% of the UK business industry is SMEs, small to medium-sized businesses, and they often use accountants to work with. So accountants will often have their knowledge challenged or their skills tested when the government changes things in the budget. For better or for worse, depending on who you ask. And then in law, well, every time our country, United Kingdom or Great Britain, however you want to divide it, does something, it's got to be written down somewhere and it's got to be worded well, and it affects, again, policy and law, so the day-to-day stuff. So can I do a controversial one or a topical one?
Yeah, please do.
All right, let's take drugs, right? Cannabis. Been debated for the last 30 years. Should we decriminalize it? Is it class C, class B? That's politics, and it's affected by law at some point. Things like that.
Okay, I didn't know where you were going with that. So
I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm aware this is, school features and a certain demographic, so I'm not going to go too extreme.
Okay, well, good. I think it's a great illustration of, as you said, politics impacts all areas of life there. And as you say, quite rightly, it's politicians who make the law that ultimately govern the rules of our society. So you talk about law, you've talked about economics, you've talked about tax. So I suppose really I want to just get your opinion here. A lot of people feel that the relationship between money and politics is cozy, let's call it cozy at best. And others maybe think that it's entirely codependent. What's your view, working inside business, working inside tax, working in a law firm? What is your view about the relationship between money and government?
Okay, so there is definitely a correlation. That you can't deny it. You don't have to be a political pundit to see that or know that. I'm sorry, it is obvious. Where the money goes, politics changes. We've all heard of various scandals of MPs getting away with things that regular lay people would not. The hardest thing I find about politics, and I'm kind of answering in a tangent here, is the nebulous nature of it and people not being able to see all the perspectives. And I'll give an example. I have owned my own business in the past, a limited company. And what many employees might not realize is when the government made changes to, like, I know, pension contributions, I'm going to say something very brazen. When the government changed pension contributions for business owners, that was them making business owners, entrepreneurs, pay for their mistakes, right? So you and I as employees, I think it's now law where like your employee has to match your pension contribution by 5%, right? That came in, what, 6-7 years ago? When did it come in? It came a while ago, sorry. And essentially what that is there was a problem with the budget and the national insurance and, you know, the pot of money that we should all have when we get old for our pensions. So the government's like, okay, we can't fix it. So essentially what's has happened is anyone who's owned a business and it has employees now has to take some money out of their revenue to look after the employees. Now, that sounds good, but ultimately it's business owners paying for the mistakes of the government and their mismanaging of funds. So money and politics definitely correlated. I think I've given a pretty good example of that.
Do you think as well that debate also applies to minimum wage, or obviously that is something that the government campaign on? It's something that this government definitely say is something that they're proud of, but ultimately it's paid by business, isn't it?
It is paid by business, and there are pros and cons to it. This is where I'm going to give my opinion that is not fully grounded in research. So people feel free to debate me on this one and take it with a pinch of salt. My observation is this: minimum wage going up is a good thing. No one should be in poverty in our country. We're quite an advanced society. We've got lots of things going for us, lots of ingenuity, productivity, engineering. We've got all these things. So we shouldn't be a poor nation per se. But essentially, when you raise minimum wage and other qualified or experienced roles don't increase in salary, essentially what you're doing is disincentivizing people from going to certain professions. And I'll give an example. Teachers, again, a very political career. It's like one of the only jobs. Policing, nursing, and teachers are the only jobs that people can comment openly on the politics of that job. Essentially, my point being, when you raise minimum wage and teachers' wages don't go up, I've got many friends in teaching who go, well, I've been qualified teacher for 5 years, 10 years. They climbed the ladder, as it were, and they see minimum wage go up and they go, Dayle, I could actually earn more money stacking shelves in Tesco's because minimum wage has gone up and mine hasn't gone up. And we know, like, from a mental perspective, stacking shelves is not as hard as teaching 30 to 500 children on a weekly basis. It's not. We're shaping our minds. The what's the word? Not the risk, the pressure or the responsibility isn't as great. So when the government raises minimum wage and they don't think about the impacts on that, it can be demoralizing for people. I've gone on tangent. Feel free to interrupt me. Sorry.
No. I think it's really interesting. I think you've talked a lot so far about small and medium businesses and individual professions, but in terms of this perception of the relationship between economics or money and government, many people would say that the city, if you like, which I think is what most people associate when we talk about money and politics to be, the city and the government are joined at the hip. And that actually the government can often be seen, rightly or wrongly, to be the junior partner in that relationship. What do you think about that?
I think it changes depending on the sector, right? So yes, in some regards, and we'll use a big corporate that we all know of in the UK, right? Tesco. a massive business with lots of revenue, with lots of employees, I could imagine they have conversations at very high levels about staffing, recruitment, how much tax they should pay. And I'll be honest, I can imagine, Tesco might have some kind of leverage when it comes to taxes. I can't say for certain because I'm not in that circle. And again, I'm not well versed in it, but you don't have to be super intelligent to go, okay, this is something that brings a lot of revenue tax wise. They might have some level of influence on what happens when the government make legislation. Again, this is more conspiracy theory-esque what I'm saying. So please don't take it with a pinch of salt, but you can see how that might impact things. And again, I think it depends on the sector and the contribution it has to our society. So again, like I said, Tesco, very big, food, clothing, really important to everyone. So the government might listen more. There's other sectors that, equally as important, but don't have as much political clout, that may not have as much influence. That's my observation on things.
Okay, and there's a lot of narrative, particularly around young people. We hear it quite a lot, and I think it's very much playing out now in some of the politics of the Green Party as it obviously rises through the polls. The idea of a wealth tax on these businesses, or a banker's tax on the bank.
So
as someone who is in the world of business and economics and law, what's your thoughts about a wealth tax?
Okay, so
let's do pros and cons first of all.
No, I'll give my ideas and thoughts. So I used to be completely opposed to it until my sister, she works in media for the BBC. She showed me a guy called Gary's Economics. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He'd be great for this show. He actually convinced me that actually some of this wealth tax actually makes sense. I think the real problem though is, and I'm going to borrow from what he says, when we say the word wealth, it's at different levels, and people don't necessarily appreciate the level that people are at. So if someone were to earn, I don't know, 100K, most people will agree that's a very good salary per year. That's a great salary. Are you hard up if you're earning 100K? Probably not. But I would argue that 100 grand now isn't what it used to be 10 years ago. Cost of living has gone up, house price has gone up, food's gone up. So 100K is still a great salary, not complaining, but it doesn't go as far as it used to because of inflation. So when people talk about taxing the wealth, I think most people who are on regular salary, so sub 6 figures, right, will go, yeah, tax that person under 150K. Now, the person under 150K looks at the person who earns, I don't know, 10 million a year and goes, yeah, tax that 10 million a year person because they're earning way more than me. And then we get into the astronomical numbers that I think Gary often talks about. He talks about someone having 100 million in liquidity, so in actual cash, because there's a difference between, actual money and your value as assets. Because a lot of people in the UK are actually millionaires. It's just, they live in their houses. They can't sell those, right? But if someone has 100 million, I can't remember the calculation, but it's something like they earn something like 3 million a year after tax and interest. Now that is when maybe you could tax someone just a smidge more. And that's where I agree with Gary. So this is me being a bit more socialist, not right wing actually, in saying, yeah, someone with that level of wealth where they earn something like 4 million a year in interest and tax alone, after tax, in interest. Yeah, give them 0.5% more. That actually would be more money because they physically can't spend anymore. They can't. So yeah, but my frustration is when people consider someone 1 or 2 brackets ahead of them and going, oh, tax that person. No. They don't understand like the 120K tax trap for many people. Long story short, when you earn personal income, you have the allowances of 20, 40, and 45%. And then when you go to a certain level of 6 figures, you lose your personal allowance plus £1 for each pound you put in. So if you were on 100K salary and you go to 130, effectively you're being taxed at like 60, 65%. Right. So you're actually paying more tax than you think about that. You're paying more tax than you earn. So you've worked really, really hard. You've gone from 50, 60, 80K in terms of your earnings, and you finally get that goal after how many years, or being really clever, did it earlier in life, and more money is paid in tax than in your back pocket. You can see why people go to accountants and say, hey, how can I mitigate some of this tax liability in the fair and unmurky way of doing so?
Absolutely. Yeah. No way are we endorsing that as a behavior, but yes, you can from a human psychological point of view, definitely see that. We are driven ultimately by incentives, I'm sure you would argue. So we said at the start, you are self-proclaimed centre-right voter, or centre-right political supporter.
Yep.
How do you define centre-right?
Okay, so whenever I define these things, to be clear, it's backstory. I haven't always been centre-right. In terms of my voting history, I've gone from Lib Dem to Labour to Conservative, voted Green once, And then last year, last voting time, I sport my ballot because I was just so angry. I literally wrote sport ballot on my vote because I just like. Anyway, so centre right, I always look at it in two extremes, right? So I explain the two extremes on left and right. On the left, you have communism, the extreme that will never ever work. Sorry, communist, it won't work. And on the far right, you've got fascism slash, dictatorship, authoritarianism to the highest order. Centre right is, in my opinion, obviously leaning towards the right, but not fascism, focusing on capital, not necessarily social prescriptions. When I look at politics, my observation is this: most people want the same thing. So let's talk about the basic things any people want: safety, security, housing, and food. The only difference with social left and right is how we go about it. Extreme example, hyperbole. Someone who leans to the right a little will say, look, if we all work harder and we are more productive and we can make more money, then we have more money to spend, which means our economy will be better, and then we'll have happier lives. Okay. Extreme socialism would say, okay, if there are people who can't work as much, we should support them until they can work, until they're fit and healthy and proper. Let's make sure we take cuts of those people who are earning more to support them. Now, I'm not opposed to that. So I said it before, I'm kind of left when it comes to health, right? If you were born in this country, you use the NHS, you've had some kind of socialist support. You were born here, your mum was probably prescribed vitamins, she had some, nurse appointments, doctor's appointments. When you were delivered, there was probably a surgeon there. You have been spent upon if you were born in this country. And so I'm all for that kind of socialism. But I also believe, as someone who's kind of gone from completely working at McDonald's when I was a kid to now working in larger businesses, medium businesses, and heading up commercials, there is a side for working hard and generating wealth through business.
Okay, so I'm going to take a punt here, and please correct me if I am wrong. This is an assumption. As someone who would put themselves on the centre, I'm going to take a punt that you weren't hugely enthusiastic about the last budget. You've mentioned budgets already. I'm going to take a punt, correct me if I'm wrong, that it wasn't your cup of tea.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the point I made where people, like, if they don't operate at a certain level, as in either they are a business owner or have worked with business owners. And I'm not saying, when I say business owner, I'm not talking necessarily like, business that earn, 50, 60 million turnover. I'm talking like I say, these small business owners, they self-owned business owner who might be turning over 100K or 500 grand, and they've got one employee. The stuff that was in the budget last year just didn't help. It just didn't help. And then other things, like I was hoping that VAT would be reduced, right? Because from a consumer perspective, I don't know why it's called VAT. What value added tax? What value does it bring to me? It just makes my TVs more expensive. Not that I'm out buying TVs all the time, but you know what I mean. And in fact, what they apply VAT to is also kind of ridiculous. So I was hoping certain things would go down. I wouldn't say I was like opposed to the last budget, but I was like, I didn't think it helped much.
Okay. And before we take a break, what would you say then? What's your one message to those that don't listen to the extension, where we're going to talk more about this? But what is your one message to those people, particularly maybe young people who are listening? Why should they care about who is in power?
Oh, I don't think they should. I think it's all one evil conglomerate, and left and right have merged ridiculously.
What do you mean by that?
I genuinely think there is like a, not conspiracy, but like, back in the day, let's say just lose Labour, for example, they were the people's champions, right? They had the unions, and the idea is they support the working man. I don't think they do that so much anymore. And then they've moved more right in terms of their politics, in terms of capitalism and money and industry. And conservatives have slightly left a little bit, but essentially they're all quite similar in terms of left and right. Actually, can I recap my previous statement to an extent?
Please.
I think it's important when you're voting for someone, right, to really look at their policies, what they're actually saying. Don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to James. Don't just listen to your parents. Be well informed. Listen to 3 or 4 different outlets. Some have biases. I'm not going to name them. They do. But take a good look at what they're actually saying, what those policies mean for you, but not just for you, right? Here's the thing with politics. It's not just about you. What does it mean for everyone as a whole? Brexit was a prime example of this. Take a bigger picture look. Take a longer term picture look. And then also, last but not least, look at the integrity of the leader. Right, I think that's something we've completely forgotten. You might disagree with how they go about it, left or right, but if you want someone of a certain moral standing or value to lead, then it's important that person leads. So you're voting for the individual, but you're voting for the party, and you're voting for their policies. Just know what they actually stand for and how they impact you short term and long term. That's my advice.
And how do we prepare young people for that?
Yeah, it's so tricky, right? So nowadays, I'm 37 years old, right? So I've noticed that people younger than me are far more interested in politics than I ever was when I was their age. Also, they've got more resources. They have Instagram, TikTok, and so much information. How do you prepare for it? I would say we need to get people better at critical thinking. So understand the laws of logic. There are three primary laws of logic: the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of excluded middle. Google what those are. I'm not going to go into them. But when you do that, pass that information through those things, right? Like kind of filter it through your brain. Don't just listen to your friends. Don't just listen to your parents. Don't just listen to an influencer and go, is that actually true? Can it be true? Is there a contradiction? And what does it actually mean, right? Just like turn on your brain. I'm not saying young people don't do this, because I think a lot of young people get tired of being told by people like me who are older than them, you're not thinking. I think they do, but be aware as well of propaganda. Now, propaganda is a word that has a bad reputation. Propaganda is not bad, by the way. It can be used for bad things, but in and of itself, it's a tool. And I'll give an example of good propaganda. In my lifetime, the number of people who continue to smoke has reduced significantly because our government successively have gone, smoking is bad. That's great propaganda. So I've waffled on a little bit, but yeah, take the information, learn to chew it up, decipher it in your mind yourself, and like this show, right? Be willing to have a conversation with people, and be willing to listen. And when people question your beliefs or your views, be willing to respectfully, verbally, very important, verbally defend them, and make sure to in a debate term, steelman their position or steelman your own position, right? Which essentially is making sure people have heard what you're actually saying and don't allow them to strawman your position, which is essentially where they insert something into your position or argument that weakens it. Can I give an example of this?
Please do.
I could say something like, this isn't my opinion, I'm just going to give an example. We should cut NHS spending because there's improper spending. Right, that's my position, for example. And someone who might strawman me might say, "Hey, Dayle, you want to cut NHS spending? Does that mean you want to fire lots of doctors and nurses?" That's not what I've said. They've inferred something that is not correct. That's a straw man. It happens a lot in politics. Happens in the media. Someone will say something, and someone will insert a straw man where it's like, no, that's not their original position. They didn't say they want to fire doctors and nurses. They didn't say they want to cull people because we've got too many sick people. That's not what they said. They just said spending needs to be better in the NHS. So yeah, be prepared for that if you're going to be looking at politics.
And just really one last thing off the back of that, because I think that's a really, really interesting point. How do you do that when, and this isn't about bashing social media, but social media generally encourages and caters and is designed for perhaps shorter, more specific, let's say more specific arguments rather than that bigger debate?
Well, you're right. So even I have been influenced by these kind of YouTube clips, these 30-second things. Just engage with it. Think, okay, someone's done a 30-second clip of whatever MP in our country. Try and look for the wider context. Try, and this will sound really decent, try and give them the benefit of the doubt. We often hear snippets of stories before we get the full story. Whether that's done intentionally to sensationalize or whether it's done on purpose to report the news as it is, that's neither here nor there. Just take your time and think about the wider context and try and have some humility and grace for that person, whoever it is in the spotlight, whether they're right or left, you don't like them or not. Just think, what is their wider argument? And make sure that you as an individual have thought about it. Don't just listen to the rhetoric of someone reporting on that person. Is
okay,
that useful?
Yeah? Absolutely. Hold that thought. We're going to take a short break now. If you want to hear more from Dayle, as we talk about his career in a bit more depth, we talk about the position of the right in current politics, and we talk about cancel culture. You can hear the rest of the conversation at the Politics Classroom community. And once again, the link is in the post. But Dayle, hold on right there, and we're going to be right back.